From Durinho potentially taking on Rachmanov for the next welterweight title, to Adesanya finally getting someone new to fight with Dricus du Plessis, these are the fights that need to happen after UFC 287. Yep, it's finally time for Burns to get his moment in the spotlight. The man's been at the very top of the welterweight division for years now. But because he's not as entertaining as some other guys like Masvidal and Colby, he hasn't been given the same repeated chances at the title. And it's definitely unfair, but the man's fought his way back to the point that he's probably just one fight away from a shot at the belt. I mean, he did just beat Masvidal so badly at UFC 287 that the guy ended up retiring. But that begs the question, who should the Brazilian brawler take on next? Colby's fighting for the title next, so he's out of the picture. Usman just fought and lost, so he's probably not going to be back anytime soon. That really only leaves two guys, Belal Muhammad and Shavkat Rakhmonov. And Belal's great, guys, but the match all the fans want to see is against Rakhmonov. Honestly, this man's vibe in terms of his dominance is so familiar to Khamzat Chimaev that beating him would almost seem like redemption for Burns. But what's Rakhmonov even done recently to warrant such a big fight for him? Well, he just recently climbed all the way to the number 6 spot in the division, and this puts him only one spot below Durinho. Not only are they both highly ranked, Rakhmonov is the perfect opponent, not just for Burns, but also for the UFC. I mean, a fight between these two could really shake up the division, and we all know how much money new and exciting title challengers bring in. You can bet Dana's thinking the same thing. If Rakhmonov, who's currently 17-0 in MMA, gets through Gilbert, well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a new star on our hands, and potentially one that could beat Leon and claim the title. If he loses, though, Burns could finally get another crack at the belt and open up even more potential matchups for the UFC. Honestly, this fight's a huge win-win for everyone involved. And if it happens, it's going to be one of those insane matchups where no one knows who's going to win. Now, as exciting as this was, I'm only getting started. Yep, luckily for you guys, Burns wasn't the only fighter who proved himself at UFC 287. Nope, Rob Font also burst onto the scene at bantamweight, and this man's insane win over Adrian Yanez really opened up the doors for him. I mean, not only is Font already ranked number 6 in the division, his last 2 fights have been against ranked opponents, and he's beaten both of them. Plus, with Yanez, this man scored a first-round KO. Now, normally, Font would still have a lot of winning to do to really put himself in the title picture, but with the state of the bantamweight division right now, he could very well end up getting a shot sooner than anyone expected. Yep, luckily for Font, there's an absolute monster among the bantamweights who hasn't been winning a lot lately. In fact, this man lost his last 3 fights. Yep, I'm talking about the ex-champ, Peter Yan. And a fight against Yan really makes a lot of sense right now, guys. They're both closely ranked, and while Yan needs someone to fight to prove himself, none of the top 5 are options at this point. He just lost to 3 of those top 5, and the other 2 are occupied. That leaves only Font. Lucky guy, or maybe not, because Jan's an absolute beast. Still, this fight could shake up the division in a big way. If Yan won, he'd be right back in the title picture. And if that sounds crazy, considering I just told you he lost all 3 of his last 3 fights, let me just clear this up for you. 2 of those 3 were very close, and both of them were against amazing opponents. Once again, this fight would be a win-win situation for both fighters and the UFC. No matter which of the 2 men wins, the bantamweight division will suddenly have an unexpected contender for the title. That too, right as Henry Cejudo returns. Yup, no matter how I think about it, this is the fight to make. Now, I've talked about Font, and the reason that I did was because this man won his fight at UFC 287, and this applies to Durinho. But that doesn't mean that there aren't exciting matchups to make with some of the losers from that epic event. Yep, Alex Pereira is still very much a threat, except he's not really a threat at middleweight anymore, considering the fact that he's moving up to light heavyweight. And if this doesn't excite you, I don't know what will, because even though Poatan lost to Izzy, that was just one loss, and he's still so dangerous that he could shake things up wherever he goes. And guys, there's no Adesanya at middleweight to stop Alex. Nope, all the guys there are slower and much less powerful than the Brazilian. Plus, the UFC has a huge opportunity on its hands. If you guys remember, the current light heavyweight champ Jamahal Hill took his belt straight off Alex's mentor Glover Teixeira. And while a lot of you guys might want to see a rematch with Izzy, honestly at this point that just doesn't make sense. I mean, Pereira got knocked out cold, and if he loses again, his star power will pretty much be gone. It makes much more sense to have him move up, avenge his teacher, and claim the light heavyweight title. And in the event that Alex wins, the UFC could set up a match between him and Adesanya for both belts. Plus, with his addition, the lightweight heavyweight division would also suddenly be full of exciting fights. Don't forget, Jiri Prochazka is coming back soon. As amazing as this would be though, the division that could see the most change following UFC 287 is still the one Alex is leaving behind. Yep, I'm talking about middleweight. And one of the main reasons is how Kelvin Gastelum is suddenly back in the picture. That's a name I haven't heard in a while, not in any positive way at least. I mean, he hasn't won since the beginning of 2021, and he pretty much sat out all of 2022. But guys, with his win at UFC 287, Gastelum is still a huge chance. And even though it's a long shot, he could finally break the stagnation at the top of the division. Right now, Gastelum is ranked at number 11, but given his incredible history at middleweight, he could climb up the ranks with one or two more convincing wins. And to start him off, the perfect opponent would be the man ranked right below him, Nassourdine Imavov. Now, Imavov himself hasn't done much recently, but this fight makes a lot of sense for Kelvin. And the UFC seems to realize this as well, because they've already tried to make it happen twice. I know I said it was a long shot, but just imagine if Kelvin is able to use the Imavov fight to launch himself to the top of the division. Suddenly, the huge problem of who to put against Izzy, who he hasn't beaten already, would be dealt with, at least for a little while. Still, in the meantime, the UFC seems to have found someone else to fill that role for now. That's right, Dricus du Plessis makes the most sense for the next shot at the title. And again, this fight would be huge for the division, because the only other guys for Izzy to fight in the top 10 are guys he's already beaten. Du Plessis might still need one more win to really make it official, but honestly, at this point, the division needs something other than just Whittaker and Izzy fighting again and again. The last stylebender just beat Poatan to reclaim his throne, and look at how exciting it was to have a new face in the mix. Du Plessis is the only ranked number 6 in the division, but he could have a similar effect, and giving him a shot at the title would definitely shake things up. I mean, even if he loses, a close loss to Adesanya might open the guy up to a rematch. Still, you've got to remember this is the fight game, and it's very possible for Adesanya to lose. As much as I've already hyped this up, let me tell you guys just how huge this could be. We could finally see UFC Africa. That's right, the event Dana's been promising since the era of the 3 African champs. And Dricus has perfectly set this up with some shots he took at Izzy and Usman. Du Plessis was born and raised in Africa. The so-called African champs were both brought up in the West. At least that's what the South African fighter said. Before he pointed out that he was the only potential African champ that could even take the belt back to Africa. So, from Adesanya finally having someone new to fight in the form of the number 6 ranked Du Plessis, to Burns potentially taking on Rakhmonov to decide the next welterweight challenger, those were the fights that need to happen now that UFC 287 is wrapped up.